Here we go. Okay.
Oh boy, now it's official.
Now it's official. Now you got to be careful what you say. Okay. So we're going to start. We're going to do a basic crash course of everything Passover, everything got to do with Pesach. Now, some things will be things that you obviously know, especially you. But there's many things, I hope, or a few things that will hopefully be new, especially new for you this year. There's a couple of kashrus things. But let's start. We'll go through it. We'll start with going over the overview. We're going to start going over the overview of the timeline, and we'll start with today. So today we actually have just outside over here 2 beautiful trees that we can make a certain blessing on, which is very applicable to this time of the year. Halacha tells us, and this comes from the Gemara in Brachot. It's not connected to Passover, but in regards to this month, this Hebrew month of Nisan, which just started, we have when you see a tree with budding blossoms, then you can make. It has to be a fruit tree. Then you can make a blessing, and you can make it on any fruit tree, preferably 2. And ideally, you should make it on weekday. You can even make it on the night, but ideally on weekday, if you need to, you can also make it on Shabbat. And when you see 1 or 2 of these trees, preferably, you can make this beautiful blessing about thanking Hashem for making these really nice fruit trees. So we have that on the website.
An olive tree, isn't it?
Yeah, there's one of each type. There's a lemon tree here, there's an olive tree, there's a fig tree, there's a few. So those 2 trees in the middle of the garden, those are both, you can see the blossoms because we're quite late in the year. Sometimes you have to wait, but now we can see them already. So yeah, that's the first thing we should know, that we can make that's one of the things, not as preparing for Passover, but that's one of the things we can do the whole month of Nisan. We can already do that now. Now, Passover in itself is unquestionably the most widely observed holiday on the Jewish calendar. Definitely. I mean, it's effectively our birth as a nation. It's our miraculous exodus from Mitzrayim, from Egypt. And it's really like, when we came out and we accepted the Torah afterwards, it's a huge deal. And it's the beginning of the year in the main sense that Nisan is the first month of the year. And there's a lot that happens in preparation for Pesach, and that's what we want to talk about. So first of all, Pesach this year is in 11 days' time. Time flies. And it starts this year on Friday night. So the first Seder is going to be on Friday night. Erev Pesach is on a Friday. And it lasts until Motzei Shabbat the following week on April 23rd. So it starts on April the 15th, Friday night. Now, in preparation for Passover, one of the things that we do is we wonder about how kosher is our house for Passover. Now, even if your house is kosher during the year, it doesn't mean at all that your house is kosher for Pesach, right? Why? Because there's a whole different set of rules in regards to the dietary requirements because of this thing called Comets, which we're not allowed to have. Now, the timesheet has all the times when we have to stop eating Comets, when you can get this on our website. You can get this outside over here. This is all the main times. We'll just run them through very quickly. On Friday, on Erev Pesach, on that Friday, the latest time to eat chametz is 11:45, 10:44 a.m. And the latest time to burn chametz is at midday at 12:02 p.m. By that time, we have to go, not only we're not allowed to eat chametz anymore. There's 2 times. The first time is when we're not allowed to eat. We're still allowed to own, and then there's another time when we're not allowed to even own chametz anymore. And then at midday, either way, the full prohibition kicks in, the biblical prohibition about even owning or having chametz in our possession, which we'll talk about in more detail later. What's important to know is that at the end of Passover, we will have chametz in our house, which we will have sold to a non-Jew, but we wait a couple of minutes because by the time it's 9 p.m., we're going to have the non-Jew who is Mike Fuel come in here and I'm going to buy back the chametz from him. But we'll talk about that in more detail soon. But those are the main times that we need to know on Erev Pesach, the latest time to eat chametz and the latest time to be able to burn chametz. Now, so we clean our homes to get rid of all edible chametz. We talk about edible chametz because if chametz is inedible, it's not considered the food, it's not considered chametz. But we get rid of all edible chametz and we clean out. The Mishnah tells us we have to look everywhere where there may be chametz, right? We don't have to lift up the tiles on top of our ceilings to look for chametz, because even if there is, it wouldn't be a prohibition because it's not somewhere where it's were included in the prohibition, which is called Bali Ra, Bali Matze. There's a prohibition to see and find chametz in your possession. That's not called finding chametz. So therefore, if it's not reasonable that there will be chametz in a certain place, we don't even have to look in that place. So for instance, the example that the Gemara brings is if you have, the Mishnah brings, if you have a wall, and if you have a wall and sometimes you want to look inside that wall to see, have the kids put chametz in it, you only have to put where your hand could reach. You don't have to put your hand all the way through the wall and into the street, effectively. So yeah, so basically we have to look for chametz wherever there could be chametz. And if people have kids at home, that means they're looking much more places, because kids travel around with food, and they take, as much as you say no food upstairs, there probably is food upstairs. So unless 100% they're listening to the rules, which is highly unlikely, you actually have to look upstairs under the beds, in the higher shelves perhaps, which they could stand on a chair and get reasonably. But you don't have to look on top of the cupboards upstairs, because there's no way, unless they're throwing bread around and that type of thing. Generally, depending on what type of kids you have, but generally we don't suspect that somebody's done that. Okay, so that's cleaning the chametz. Okay, so we have to clean everywhere inside the house, inside a person's office as well. And they also have to clean inside the car. People often forget about the car, and cars are sometimes the dirtiest place, again, especially if you have kids. And there's crumbs all over the floor and all that type of thing. We have to get rid of chametz. That's part of the cleaning that we do. And it ties very well with spring cleaning. It's in perfect time. Next thing we come to is selling the chametz. Now, selling the chametz is an ancient custom. Now, it wasn't always accepted by everybody, this idea of selling chametz, because it kind of looked like a joke. I'm going to sell you my $1,000, bottle of whiskey, and I'm going to buy it back, and you're not really allowed to take it. However, it's important to know that almost every opinion allows selling of the chametz, despite the fact that it looks dubious, because it is a valid sale. There was one opinion of the Vilna Gaon in Eastern Europe, who he 350 years ago, he didn't like the idea of the sale, because he held it wouldn't be upheld in a court of law. So he said if it has no validity in a court, it's not a real sale. But you should know that the sale of chametz form has been taken to court here in the United States, and it's been upheld. Because in the United States, it's as simple as if you put your signature onto something, it has validity, right? So the simple thing is, if you sell your chametz here and you try to cancel it in the middle of Pesach, and the non-Jew takes you to court, he will win in most cases, because you've put your signature onto it. Therefore, seeing as the sale is valid, this is perfectly okay. And probably even the Vilna Gaon, who back then didn't agree to the sale, will agree to this because the sale is completely valid. Now, it's important to know that the sale is really, really, really important, including for elderly people and people you may know who are generally not so religious, but they should be particular to sell the chametz, because eating chametz after Pesach, which wasn't sold, is a sin in and of itself. It's only a rabbinical prohibition, but it's still a prohibition to eat chametz after Pesach, which wasn't sold. Never mind the fact that you're saving them from the strict prohibition of owning chametz over Pesach. And it's such an easy thing to do, right? To sell your chametz, you just add your signature, you add your name. It's so easy to sell your chametz. So we should try and encourage friends and family and elderly members and people that may not be affiliated as much as possible to just put their name on the form. They're not going to lose any money over it. They'll only get a couple. They'll get, that they'll fulfill the mitzvah of getting rid of chametz, and they will also be saved from the sin of eating, of owning chametz over Pesach, which is a big deal, and also the sin afterwards, which is eating chametz which wasn't sold over Pesach, which was owned by a Jew. Now, if you happen to know a Jewish store that doesn't sell their chametz, then you shouldn't buy from them after Passover. But in any specific cases, you can come ask questions. But generally, that's the rule. If chametz wasn't sold over Passover, it cannot be consumed afterwards. Okay. Any questions?
Who you sell the chametz to? Does it matter?
It doesn't really matter. So now it's interesting. There were two different opinions among the sages about how we sell chametz. This was an American Gedolim. One of them said we have to sell it to the simplest non-Jew that we find, because if they're intelligent and they start thinking they understand their agreement, but they don't really, maybe they'll get the picture of the sale wrong. However, the other opinion, which is generally accepted, is we look for an intelligent, and this is what we do here. Like I mentioned, we have Mike Field coming in. He totally understands what we're doing. It's very important that he does, I think. And therefore, the sale is totally valid in the sense that not only is it a fully legal and binding sale, but he fully understands the capacity in which we sell it to him and then buy it back from him after Pesach. So yeah, this is an ancient custom. It's perfectly okay to sell even. Some people don't sell real chametz, again, based on this Ramadan, but it's important to know this is a totally legal agreement. It would and has stood up in the US courts of law, and therefore we can rely on this until today to sell our chametz. Okay, now moving on to utensils. Now, year-round, we have some utensils which we use.
Rav, I'm sorry.
Yes.
I've got a question. I've got
Sure.
a chametz question, a chametz storage question. So you sell your chametz to your neighbor, and where do you put said chametz? Like, do you leave it in the freezer in the garage? Like, where do you put your pieces that, what, does it have to leave the house? Where do you store it during this sale?
It's a very good point. I forgot to mention it. After you sold your chametz, you can keep it inside your house, but you should designate it sold as such in order that you don't come to partake from it. So ideally, put all your chametz into one specific freezer or fridge, or put it into one shelf of the fridge and clearly mark it as such. Again, making sure that no crumbs fall into your Pesach food. Put it in a specific cabinet, specific cupboard, a specific room. Some people sell the whole house. Whatever it is, you mark that said cupboard or said area as sold.
And when you sell, does money exchange hands? Like, do you sell for $1 and is that how it rolls?
So it has been the custom in many communities to take that the rabbi takes money, but that's generally because the rabbis needed the money to make Passover. It is not required halachically that rabbi takes money for the sale, and this is how we do it now. The sale is done via power of attorney. So in essence, everybody who's selling the chametz just allows the rabbi to then give ownership over the said chametz to whoever he pleases, and he even designates. So we even write in the agreement that you sign that somebody else can do it in case I become incapacitated. So we kind of cover all the bases, but you don't have to give money. It happens to be that at the time of the sale, I will lift up a bunch of quarters, one on behalf of each person that gave into me a chametz sale form, and I will, using those quarters, I will give those to the non-Jew. But that's not, it's not, that's separate. You don't need to give me any money, is the short. Even though it was a custom in the past, but that was generally just because the rabbi wanted money, needed money.
I think I've got quarters somewhere, Rabbi. They're yours if you need them.
We have a roll of quarters here ready.
All right, excellent. Thank you.
Okay, so moving on. So we explained Passover. We mentioned the blessing of the trees, which is not connected, but it's connected to the month. We mentioned cleaning for Passover, selling the chametz for Passover, and it's important, again, get your friends, your family, elderly members who might not be able to sign a PDF, and this can be signed digitally. Again, it's a power of attorney. Anything which would be held up, thank you, Jonathan. That's the link to the chametz form. Anything which legally wouldn't be held up, would be held up in a court of law, which these are. It's a regular power of attorney. Is totally valid for this sale. Okay, moving on to our utensils. We shouldn't use any of our regular utensils because of the issue of having to, them being chametz utensils, and they have what we call the taste of chametz inside of the wall. So even if they're 100% clean, a tiny drop of it could go into the food that you make on Passover and then make it included in the prohibition of eating or consuming or benefiting from chametz. And it's important to know that the prohibition to benefit from chametz is not only, me benefiting from my chametz, even me benefiting from someone else's chametz. So if a non-Jew was to give me chametz, potentially I couldn't even use it as a door stopper. And that just explains how strict the prohibition is. And even a tiny amount of chametz, that's just shows you how far. And it's one of the strictest prohibitions we have, and which is why we are so particular to clean our houses, sell our chametz, and really go through all the steps to make sure that we get rid of everything. Okay, so practically speaking, generally we assume chametz is a loaf of bread, and of course that is. But because on Passover, we're not just forbidden to eat a large amount of chametz, even a crumb of chametz is considered eating chametz on Passover, and has that same prohibition of karet, which is one of the worst punishments that we have, being cut off from the nation. Therefore, we are particular. Even anything which is not labeled as kosher for Passover, general things that we can buy in the supermarket, and we would be able to buy during the year. They have OU on it. If they don't have OU for Passover, we assume, besides a certain few things which we'll discuss in a second, we assume that they don't have kosher for Passover status, which makes shopping for Passover much more difficult. However, as always, knowledge is power, and the more you know, the more you can buy. And there are different categories of food. You can find this inside of the OU guide. Very, very comprehensive and fantastic list of things. There are different types of products that we have. Number one, we have Passover approved products. These are regular. You go to the shop, OUP, or it says kosher for Passover. Those are fine. You obviously can buy those. There's what we call Passover certified products. There are other products which we call Passover approved, which are they are kosher for Passover, even if they don't have special Passover certification. So examples of this would sometimes include coffee, or basic ground coffee. And you can find a list of trusted brands that we trust are not adding any ingredients in. And again, even crumbs.
Soldiers.
Yes, exactly. Who we can trust. Yes.
Sometimes the P stands for para.
Never,
Yes.
never.
They won't. They
Only
generally they
OU.
don't write. They don't use P for para for this very reason, because it will confuse people.
Exactly. That's
If you
why.
find a hechsher that does that, then it's an issue on their part. But OU, for example, don't do that. Jonathan, to answer your question, yes, if you sign your power of attorney Comets form, then you can assume it's sold on behalf of all the Comets that you own. If you have Comets in multiple places, you can fill in multiple forms and detail the locations. You have a holiday home or somewhere else, or you're selling on behalf of someone else. And again, mark the areas that are sold as sold.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have the OUP products, which, examples of certified products which have a hechsher and have for Passover. Those are the best things to buy because they have been confirmed to have zero chametz in. Then we have products, again, like we mentioned, like coffee and other things like that, which have a hechsher on generally, but they don't need a hechsher for Passover because, like sugar and again, the list of trusted brands is quite comprehensive. Check it in the OU guide, which I'm actually gonna put in the chat.
Actually, take that to the store with me.
Oh, Pablo.
The OU book, I take it with me to the store.
Yeah, it's worth taking the OU book to the store
I'm
because
also in Costco.
it
Taking
has
on my
literally
phone.
lists of brands that we can trust. For example, the coffee, baking soda, avocado oil,
Right.
all of these things we need. Even sometimes nuts, plain nuts. We can buy them if they have a hechsher on, even though they don't specifically have kosher for Passover on it. Some of the brands which we trust. Now we have other types of food which are marked as kitniyot. Now kitniyot is a custom of Ashkenazim that we don't have kitniyot. I'm a Sephardi, but I still say we because I, as a Sephardi, also don't have a custom to eat kitniyot. Now kitniyot is a custom which they started at the time when, like corn is an example of this, where they were kept very close to wheat. And it was either, they're not sure the reasoning, but either it was hard to differentiate or sometimes there was wheat mixed in with it. And wheat and flour is always given the status of chametz over Passover. Why? Because even if a drop of water touches it, it becomes proper chametz, which is why we're not allowed to have any flour on Passover around the house, and we have to sell it because it wasn't kept as clean, and it wasn't specifically kept away from water. And in fact, most of the flour which we have is processed, and we assume actually has already become chametz in many cases. Okay, so the status of kitniyot is that generally for Ashkenazim we shouldn't have it. However, if somebody requires these foods for dietary reasons, for example, they're slightly ill, or children, then we are not particular. Small children, we're not particular, so they can have things which have the status of kitniyot. Again, but they should be approved for Passover, like anything we buy on Passover.
Are we not allowed to have flour that is
What?
not
Sorry.
a dough yet?
Sorry?
A
Yeah,
flour
you
that
can't.
is not a dough.
It's considered chametz. We give it the status of chametz because we assume it most likely has already come into contact with water, And even if it hasn't, because they weren't careful with it, we assume that it has a chametz status. So, which is why we sell flour. We shouldn't own flour over Pesach.
The thing with kidney-o, we have one son-in-law who eats kidney-o, and we were told that he has to have separate utensils for all the kidney-o.
Yeah, so you get different opinions about how strict you have to be about the custom of kidney.
He
Yeah,
has separate kidney-o.
that's impressive. In regards to people that have people that have children that are using formula and similar things, then there are further leniencies that we can use, things that are just regularly marked as OU or UD in certain cases because the kids need to have these types of things. Now, moving on to non-food items.
Make a noise.
This is a very, very interesting discussion about how strict we are with non-food items. Think of lipstick, think of toothpaste, think of all the things we use for oral hygiene, mouthwash. So there's differing opinions on this, even the OU themselves don't have an opinion on this because of how it's literally like a toss-up. Because there's two sides to this. It's a concept of, is it considered an edible food? And you can easily, even superficially, understand the debate about this. Is mouthwash, is toothpaste edible food? Well, technically it is edible. You won't die if you eat it, but it's not really a food, right? So do we give it the status of food? And only if it's given the status of food, do we give it the status of Comets? And does it require kosher for Pesach certification? So obviously the best would be to buy, and there are some toothpaste and mouthwash which are kosher for Passover, but they're not very readily accessible. So the general consensus, or at least the ruling I want to give here, is that it depends if you are into the taste. Because if you're into the taste, that means you're interested in the flavoring. And specifically, what's most times in the flavoring of these products is something called Sorbitol, which is a glucose byproduct, which can very regularly contain Comets. And again, if you're not interested in the taste, for example, a typical example would be a kid, and they're buying a strawberry toothpaste. So that would not be allowed to be bought on Passover without a Passover certification on it, because they are interested in the taste, and the taste very likely comes from a Comets source, i.e. this sorbitol glucose flavoring, and therefore they are having benefit and enjoying very likely Comets on Passover. However, an adult who doesn't really care about the taste, they just want to get their teeth clean, similarly, to do with a mouthwash, they're not that into the mint taste, and they just want to, so they wouldn't need to be strict with such a thing. And this is an interesting debate in general about whether we give these things a status of food, but that would be the ruling I would give. If you're sure that you're not into the flavor of these things, you can buy them without special Passover hechsher. However, if you enjoy the taste, then for you it's considered food, and then for you would have a problem of Comets for these things. So that's in regards to oral hygiene products, and that includes lip balm and lipstick, which have some taste to them. And the question is if you're into them or not. And lipstick is less likely. Lipstick is less likely because it's there's less taste in it. It's not like it's a mint toothpaste, but still there's sometimes this element to it where they give it this little peachy flavor to it. Not that I've ever tried it, but apparently.
I have one question.
Yeah.
Play-Doh. Play-Doh is definitely Comets. Can you give it to play with other stuff?
Yeah, so the problem with Play-Doh is that because kids play with it, they have to make it essentially edible. It's not, we don't recommend kids eat Play-Doh, but if kids ate Play-Doh, nothing would happen. So, which is why people are very strict with Play-Doh. And because it's also such a high, it's literal Comets, like it's actual flour and water. So that's why we get rid of Play-Doh. Yeah. But, that said, if, it's not the highest level of Comets because it's not actually a food, it's not supposed to be eaten. But, yeah. Now, in regards to other non-food items, aluminum foil, people get very nervous about plates because they find out that plates have starch on it, both in the glue and in the fiber, to make a paper plate, not a regular, to make paper plates into firm things that you can eat off. They add starch.
Straight up. And remember, straight in the room, and they're not.
And starch is Comets, essentially. It can be Comets. Now, first of all, it's worth knowing that they don't use starch from wheat nowadays because it's simply more expensive than cornstarch or other types of starch. So it's most likely not Comets. But even if it was, this is an example of something which is not made for food. And it says the Hebrew concept is called Charchei Kodem Zmaneh, where before Passover came in, it didn't have a status of food, and therefore it doesn't have a status of Comets. Because, even though it is technically flour and water, but it's not designed to be a food, it's designed to be part of the glue, it's designed to be part of the substance of the paper plate, and therefore these do not require a hechsher. So paper cups, paper plates, all these things, even though you may have heard sometimes concerns about these things, but you don't have to be worried, and you can buy these without
What about the
hechsher.
plastic plates?
Pardon?
What about the plastic plates?
Plastic, yeah, plastic are for sure okay, because those don't even have starch in, generally.
That's what-
Now, in regards to bottled water over Passover, now bottled water generally you'd think doesn't need a hechsher. However, there's an important thing to know that on Passover, even a drop of Comets would be a problem only if it was put there over Passover, because generally we in Jewish kashrus we have a ruling that it's something that's called batal b'shishim. It's if you have 60 times the amount of whatever the non-kosher food is, normally it's fine, because it's called batal. It's irrelevant and nullified is the translation of the word. However, on Passover itself, if one tiny drop of bread crumb falls into your giant pot of soup, you can't have any of that pot of soup anymore, because there's no concept of nullifying, because of the importance of how strict Chametz is on Pesach. However, before Pesach, it does become nullified. This is why it is ideal to buy things like bottled water and even sugar and these things which you'll be allowed to buy without a special kosher for Passover certification. Sugar is a specific list in the OU book about which ones they trust. But there's many of these that we can buy, but just buy them before Passover as much as possible. Specifically bottled water, because a bottled water, because of how quick it is to manufacture these, it's very often that they'll come from the factory and they will have been bottled on Passover. Therefore, if it's a type of factory which has, which is obsessed with hygiene, there's like, a ton of bottled water companies out there. And if it's one where even a crumb, and sometimes in the glue, sometimes in other elements of it, the glue, like we mentioned, is not such an issue. But a crumb falling in a bottle of water would not be an issue if it fell in before Passover, because we have the concept of bittul. So the easiest thing to do is go shopping as much as you can before Passover, because anything you shop on Passover, if it was made on Passover, that crumb falling in wouldn't become nullified. So the general thing is buy water before Passover. Now, that said, plain water is not a problem, because the hygiene companies have, and the way they're mass producing it, we're not really concerned about even a drop of water. When we talk about buying bottled water before Passover, we're talking about water with minerals. Water with minerals, we're not 100% certain about all those ingredients that went into the minerals which they're adding in. So we're concerned that maybe one of those is a chametz or a chametz byproduct. In those cases, we say you can buy it, but buy it before Passover, just in case it was bottled on Passover and one of those minerals has a trace of chametz in, and we wouldn't have the concept of being nullified. And sure, if you want to buy bottled mineral bottled water, do it, but do it before Passover. Then it doesn't need any Passover certification, but general water is fine to buy throughout, because there's no concern about any bread or bread byproduct being in there. It's worth knowing that the OU announced that this year, due to the companies decided that there's not enough demand for kosher for Pesach yogurts, the national brands, are not making any kosher Pesach yogurts. However, there are a few kosher brands, but those will only be found like in the bigger cities. Unfortunately, this year there's not going to be any kosher Pesach yogurts. Anyway, but that sums up the kosher for Passover part of this. Again, I can only say check the OU guide. It's got a lot of advice about medical conditions, about medicines, and again, general medicines which you just swallow are not an issue because they're not considered food, because you don't enjoy the taste. You're not supposed to enjoy the taste. But those soluble medicines, those medicines which have a good flavor to the outer wrapper and the casing, could be considered, and therefore check the OU guide for guidance on those, or get in touch with me. But generally those shouldn't be a problem. Some things don't require, some mass-produced things like sugar don't require hechsher if they're bought from a reputable company. Look in the guide for a list of companies that are reputable. Always best to buy before Passover, because we have the concept of even if there was a crumb, it's nullified.
Well,
One sec.
I think it's a good point to also, for milk and eggs, if you buy milk and eggs, you should buy before Pesach.
Yes, yeah, that's a very good point. Milk, we should not buy milk which doesn't have Passover certification on Pesach, but buy it before Pesach, and it is fine. Preferably, wash off the bottle before you use it. Wash off the bottle, open it, just clean it a little bit, just in case there is a crumb on the casing. But again, buy it before Passover and you have no problem. Ari?
So sorry, just to say, so milk that is obviously kosher, but not necessarily kosher Pesach, you can buy beforehand and you can use it during Pesach, but not the same with yogurt.
Yeah, yogurt's a different thing because it has,
Got it.
there's a lot of ingredients in it. Milk is milk. Now, the only concern would be a drop of flour, a drop of bread crumb or something non-kosher Pesach. For that, we say buy it before Passover because the drop doesn't matter before Passover. That said, when you're opening it up on Passover, just wipe it down. Just make sure that there isn't a crumb on the outside, because a crumb becomes problematic on Passover.
Understood. Thank you.
Yes, Ari. Ari, do you have a question?
Yeah, sorry, I'm on a cell phone, having a hard time using the Zoom. So in the case of butter, which thus far I haven't found any kosher for Passover butter yet in Charleston. I don't know if anybody has a source for that. What is the prohibition? If milk would be okay, why would no OUD butter be acceptable? Why does that have to have a Passover certification?
Right. So first of all, Ruth is telling us that in Publix they do have kosher for Passover
Tub
butter.
butter, breakstone tub butter is with the kosher Pesach on it.
Tub butter, which is kosher for Pesach.
So we haven't seen that. We have only
just
seen
bought
sour
two.
cream.
She just
got it
bought two,
today?
she says.
I bought it this week.
This week.
Okay. Okay.
Oh, okay. Usually comes a week before Pesach.
What? I don't know.
Okay, good to know. Good to know. Okay, but that's in already.
And
It's
the
in Publix.
cottage cheese is in and the sour cream is in.
And cottage cheese and sour cream, all in Publix.
Breakstone, yes.
Breakstone, yeah, Jonathan said breakstones as well.
Yeah.
And the thing about butter is just a bit more complicated than milk. I think there's more ingredients. I would have to check out whether the same status applies. But it's like, even though they don't give this, I don't believe they give this formal recommendation about milk. But the basic idea is that the concept of bittul, the concept of nullifying it will apply because, obviously it's ideally to buy with a hechsher. But if we can't, we buy before Passover and rely on the concept of bittul, of nullifying the drop which may be in it, and then we wash it on Passover. Okay, it's good to know. They can be found in most stores, breakstones.
Yeah, and you have to look, it's just a little mark on the top that says kosher Pesach. You really gotta look for it, but it's there.
Okay, and the mark is on the top.
It's on the side, I think. But it's
Okay.
there somewhere.
Okay, and on seal. Okay. So that, again, I can just finish off that section of this by saying, check the OU guide. They have a really comprehensive list of everything. First of all, that they give kosher authorization to, but also that they say that you can buy even without kosher Passover hechshers if it has regular kosher certification on it from specific trustworthy companies. Okay, moving on. Ari? No. He's still got his hand up. Virtual hand. Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not able to get it to come off. You answered my question. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. I can lower it for you. There you go. Okay. Moving on to the catering part of it. So we mentioned the idea of cleaning everywhere where food we have a reasonable suspicion food may be in our houses. If you have kids, that makes it a lot more places, including the upstairs, despite the fact that you say no food upstairs. Then we have selling of the Comets, which is so important and easy to do. Encourage people that may not know how to download, print a PDF to please do so. And then we have the idea of the utensils. So we mentioned that we can't use the same utensils because they are not clean or because they need catering, which means that they have what we call the blias, the taste of chametz inside of the walls. And our sages tell us blias are like mamashas, they're like real chametz inside of the walls of our pots. So we have to imagine that there's a loaf of bread inside the wall of our pot, and therefore, and when we heat it up and we put some food in it, it's going to come out, and therefore we can't use it. So therefore, it's important to know that we can kasher. Now we will be doing a kashering here in the shul for all. Well, don't bring your oven, but you can bring any kind of small, pot that you have, or any utensils that needs kashering, even treif. Just please make sure that they are clean. That means 100% clean, and including in between the handle and the pot, etc., and unused for the previous 24 hours. This will be next Sunday, April 15th at 10 a.m. Now, for those who want to be able to kasher at home, you just have to know how to do it. Again, there's a guide in the OU book, but the basic concept is what we call in Hebrew kaboilo kach polto, which means the same way the Comets went into the walls of whatever this is, went into the spoon, went into the oven, went into the pot. That's the same way the Comets will come out. For instance, check your oven. The walls of your oven, they got the taste of chametz in the walls when you cooked, when you baked your challah inside of the oven, when you baked all those chametz products throughout the year. So if you want to kasher your oven, first of all, again, always a criteria, you have to make sure it's 100% clean, and then you just turn the oven on the maximum. However, the trays are a stricter level, and if a person has self-cleaning oven, if it's a proper self-clean, now some more modern self-cleaning ovens that don't even get to 500 degrees, they don't even get to like a super high temperature. They use something called aquatic cleaning. But if it's a good regular old-fashioned, self-cleaning oven, then you can just turn it on the highest again once it's cleaned and leave the trays in. But otherwise, you should you should take the trays and preferably cover them up when you use them over Passover, because it's controversial about how you can actually kasher those trays, because some people say they need what's called the highest level of kashering. We'll explain that in a second. So what are the levels of kashering? The basic, the one that we all know is a boiling pot of water, and this is what we're going to be doing here. And you dump your vessels inside of that. Now, this is called hagala. Now, it's important to know that, first of all, stay safe. This is, by definition, kashering needs extreme temperatures, and that's the way it works. The extreme temperature extracts the taste, whatever it is is inside of this utensil, and gets it out. That's how you should think of it. So extreme temperatures are dangerous. Only do it in a safe manner. Use gloves, and be careful when you do it. Now, hagala has to be done to anything which was, for instance, a spoon or a fork, or any utensils that you use during the year to eat your meat or your regular food with, because they touched hot chametz, need to be kashered in hot boiling water. Now we have to be particular. That's not just hot water; it has to actually be bubbling. You'll see the bubbles, and then you dunk it in. Now for bigger utensils, you can do half-half. So you put half in, and then you put the other half in. And ideally, keep in mind that straight after you do hagala to any utensil, you should wash it in cold water. And that kind of cools the temperature of it right down. It's also very convenient because it allows you to turn it around if you need to put the other side into the boiling hot water. But that's the idea of doing hagala. Using boiling water whilst the water is boiling has to be in the first, what we call kli rishon, in the first pot that was actually on the fire, preferably still on the fire. And by that, we dunk it in. The bubbling water takes out any taste that may be inside of the whatever utensil we're kashering. Keep in mind, plastic may melt. And anyway, it's controversial about kashering plastic. Most people don't kasher plastic. But in regards to metals, this is the way it's done. Glass is a different concept. Sephardim will say glass doesn't need kashering. Ashkenazim will say glass can't be kashered. But general glass utensils, this is how we do it in boiling hot water. So that's the regular level of hagala. Then we have a concept called libun kal, which is burning with a fire, but burning it in a light way. Now, I'm not going to talk about this too much because most people don't have blow torches lying around the house, unless they bought one from Elon Musk's company, the flamethrower. We don't have these, and these you have to be extremely careful with. And even though they, the basic idea is this can be used in place of hagala. So if you have, let's say, a big utensil that you can't dip, you can use the blowtorch and go across every spot and make sure to kasher it that way. Now, surfaces, we use the same method of hagala, which is boiling water. But the problem occurs because as soon as you take the pot off the fire, the surface, the pot generally stops boiling, and then you pour it, which becomes a lower level of cashew because it's no longer a pot which is on the fire. It's like a secondary, it's what we call pouring from a pot which was on the fire, iroi klirishin. Now, generally, this is still okay, as long as we make sure to get every single spot. And, they say with photography, if you don't look stupid when you're taking a photo, you're not doing it right. You got to get the right angles. And they say the same thing with Hagala. If you don't get water all over, you're probably not, when you're cashering surfaces, not when you dip in a fork. You're probably not doing it right. So one of the tricks that people do is they use something which has a small entrance, or just pour out a small amount of water. And again, making sure that the water is still bubbling hot, make sure to get every single spot. And now I'll be honest, the easiest way to sort a counter out for Pesach is just to cover it. But to cover it properly, to cover it in a way that it's like 2 solid layers that won't just tear over Pesach, and you'll end up having your Pesach food touching the non-kosher for Pesach counter. Right? That would be the easiest way to cover it, with solid. Some people do both. Just be careful in case it tears. You don't need to do both, right? If you do want to kasher it, you have to make sure that you're pouring boiling hot water over the whole thing. Now, one of the tricks you can do is if you take a kettle and you keep it on the base, it will keep bubbling as long as the lid is open. Again, as always, you have to be careful. You have to do it with gloves. But if you do it that way, the water is still bubbling because you've got it on the base. It's still plugged in. You can use an extension lead to be able to move around. And that way you have 100% bubbling water from it's like bubbling on the fire. Again, be very, very careful. And obviously don't do this anywhere near kids. Okay, again, there's everywhere in the guide, they have this detailed Hagala primer, they call it. And that's the way we do it. We're not going to go into too much details, but the general thing is pots, pans, all metal utensils can be kashered in this way. Plastic should not be kashered, except in extreme circumstances. Come and ask a question. And we shouldn't wait. We shouldn't leave this to the last minute. We shouldn't leave it. This Hagala and all these things in kashering, preparing our kitchen for Passover, shouldn't be done at Erev Pesach, especially the self-cleaning function in the oven. Now, it's important to know self-cleaning function in the oven, even though they advertise it and they have it on and it's super easy to just flick it on, it's not good for the oven. It's not. Besides the modern one, which isn't so good for kashering because it uses Aqualift technology and it doesn't get that hot. But self-cleaning is not good for the oven. So therefore, if you're going to do it, don't do it too often. Once a year, maximum 2 times a year, number one. And number two, don't wait till the day before Passover, because if you do it Erev Pesach in the morning and you put it, and something happens, to your oven, you're stuck without an oven for Passover. So sometimes repairs are required after it. So don't want to scare you away from it, but keep in mind that self-cleaning is not, again, the manufacturers recommend it probably because they want you to buy a new oven, but self-cleaning it on a regular basis is not good for the oven. It gets to extremely hot temperatures, and it's reason why it's so good in terms of kashering the oven, but we have to keep that in mind. So yeah, don't leave kashering till the last minute. Get it done in advance in order that you're not stressing out over it last minute.
You have to do it in advance because you have to do the cooking in the oven.
Yeah, exactly. Some people, they wait and they do the cooking on Passover and thing.
Oh, can't imagine.
Okay. So what else do we have? Not everything can be kashered. Again, plastic can't be kashered. Ceramic can't be kashered. In the vast majority of cases, china and coated china can't be kashered. Right. So materials like rubber, make sure it's tough rubber, otherwise it'll melt. Metal, wood, and stone, and fabric can be kashered. Okay, moving on. Again, make sure everything in the kitchen's clean, including any baby high chairs you have, any chairs that you've used, and these should be cleaned. Even in the nooks and crannies, to make sure that there's no crumbs that we end up touching on Pesach and eating, because like, as we mentioned, even a crumb on Passover is extremely strict. Microwaves are complicated to kasher. Let me know if you want to do that. It involves putting a cup of hot boiling water with soap in and leaving it in for an extended period of time, somewhere around 10 minutes, until the entire thing is steaming. And that's a method of kashering which works according to many opinions.
Can I say
Sorry, Rob.
something?
Yes.
Just letting you know that it is hot, like you said, and after 10 minutes, when you touch the cup when you take it out, it pops in your hand. So don't try it home.
Yeah, as usual, be careful with that. Yeah.
Sorry, was that for the dishwasher?
No, that was a microwave.
Sorry.
Not
Okay.
here.
Dishwashers can be run the main thing about dishwasher is you can clean them very well and you can run them on an empty cycle and you can, but the drain at the bottom will almost always have pieces of food in it. So if you want to use your dishwasher on Pesach, the first thing you have to do is clean it 100%, which includes getting down to the bottom, opening up the filter at the bottom,
Yeah.
and getting out all the gunk and food that will be at the bottom over there. And again, it's the general rule with all cashering. It has to be 100% clean. If you can't clean it, you can't casher it.
So sorry,
without
can you repeat the one for the microwave? How long does it go in again?
10 minutes.
10 minutes. Lovely. Thank you. Sorry.
10 minutes. But again, be careful. As Abby said, it gets very, very, very hot, and the cup will likely, if it's plastic. I mean, obviously, don't use a plastic cup, but yeah, some people say put a styrofoam cup is the best idea for that. But yeah, do it with caution. And again, read the OU guide. They have brilliant guidelines on all of these types of things. Okay. So any specifics you can ask me later about questions about cashering and all these things. We're going to move on because we don't have so much time to the specifics of the mitzvahs for Pesach, for Passover. So the night before Passover, we have the very important commandment to do bedikas Comets, to search for Comets. Now, in the old days, when they had very, very small houses, this would be their main looking for Comets, and some have the custom nowadays to hide 10 pieces of bread around, because we hope that our house, the night before Passover, this year, it's going to be Thursday night, April 14th, but we hope that our houses will actually be clean for Passover, and even the very small amount we may have for Comets for breakfast the next morning, or to be able to burn the next day, is put in a specific, should be by then put in a very specific location. But on that night, on Thursday next week, we do have the commandment and to do the actual looking for Comets, which is an obligation in and of itself. And we make a blessing on this. And we then go look around the house with a torch or with a candle. We actually look for Comets on this night. And again, some have the custom to hide 10 pieces of bread. This is based in Kabbalah. It's based on the fact that if your house is actually clean for Passover, you won't find any Comets. And you don't want your blessing to go in vain. I'm looking for Comets, but I don't find any. So we hide, some have the custom to hide 10 pieces of bread. So this we do on Thursday evening, April 14th. And then afterwards, we say Kol Chamira, which is the first time we mention the fact that we want to, any Comets that we didn't find, but may still be in our house, we have no ownership over. Okay. The next morning, on Friday morning, Friday the 15th of April, we're going to be burning the Comets. And again, the last time you can burn it at home, make a small fire. Again, we don't make a blessing on this, but we do. This is a very integral minhag. It's a part of what we do. And the latest time to burn Comets is at 12:02 on that Friday. And
12 in the afternoon.
12, yeah, just after midday. That's the latest time. We're quite late in the year, so it's a bit later than it normally would be. So that's the latest time that we burn the Comets, and you can do that at home. You can bring it here to the shul, where we're going to have a little fire outside for all the pyromaniacs can come and join me, and we will fulfill this beautiful mitzvah of burning our Comets. This will be at 10 a.m. We're going to burn the Comets at 10 a.m. because again, 12 is the latest time, so we can do it earlier. We're also going to have the sale of the Comets with Mike Fuel over here at 10 a.m.
Friday.
Pardon? On the same Friday, yeah. And again, you don't have to come to that. The sale will take effect as long as you've signed the power of attorney. We'll do it on your behalf. If you just want to see the procedure and you want to see the actual sale, you can come along and you'll see Rabbi Hoagman and myself over here. We're both going to sell our Comets to the same person. And I'd like to thank Mike for being so accommodating. Not only is he coming on Friday at 10 a.m., he's also coming Saturday night, a week later at 9 p.m. He's coming just before 9 p.m., 8:50 p.m. to sell us the Comets back. And from 9 p.m. on that Saturday night, we can all partake in our Comets again because it will be ours once again. Unbelievable, really. I was impressed by his dedication to the cause. Okay, so Erev Pesach again is Friday, and for those firstborns, we have the fast of the firstborns. We will have a siyum after Shachris over here. Rav Paul will be making a siyum on Masechtas Chagiga and Seder Moed, and Shachris will be at 7 a.m. The siyum will probably be around 7:45 over here for all firstborns. They come and they hear the siyum, and then they can eat that day. Person should try and prepare everything they need for the Passover Seder in advance, so it's not too much stress in the night. And again, we don't have time to go into all the specifics, but the general mitzvah that we have on Passover night, the primary mitzvah is to talk about the Haggadah, to talk about the Exodus from Egypt. That people forget often. They get very caught up in the other mitzvah. The main thing is to talk about our Exodus from Egypt. The second, of the Torah obligated mitzvahs that we have is eating matzah. And both men and women are obligated to eat certain measurements of matzah. People often ask, how much matzah? So, they once went to ask the Chavetz Chaim, how much matzah? Some people say, you have to eat the ton. He lifted up his hand, he said, this much matzah. And that's far less than most rabbis will tell you nowadays. And the OU actually have an interesting life-size diagram of how much matzah you may need to eat. And it's basically almost a full square matzah, and that's how much we need to eat for the main eating of the matzah during Motzi Matzah, and then a smaller piece during Korech when we wrap the maror and the matzah together. Okay, so anyway, that's the Torah prohibition, Torah mitzvahs that we have on the night: reading the Haggadah, talking about leaving Egypt, and then eating matzah. The rabbinical mitzvahs that we have on the night are the 4 cups of wine, or grape juice. Preferably there should be some wine mixed in it, and preferably it should be red wine, because that is kind of a rich man's wine. Also reminds us of the blood. There's many meanings behind all of these things. Maror, eating bitter herbs. Some eat horseradish. Most eat romaine lettuce. It's important to check the lettuce for bugs. Again, details of that can be found inside the OU guides. You'd be surprised once you start looking for bugs how many bugs you find. And if you check too many lettuce and you don't find any bugs, again, you're doing it wrong, because again, there are tons of tiny bugs. I'd say maybe 1 in every 3 lettuce or so. So make sure you're maybe not here so much. That's what we had in Gibraltar at least. So make sure you're looking for bugs inside of the maror. Another one so the rabbinical mitzvahs, again, 4 cups of wine, eating the maror, then eating the afikomen, which is the final piece of matzah, which is the last thing we eat on the night. And that's a reminder of the Pesach offering, which we don't have anymore. And the other one is the other rabbinical mitzvah, which many people don't know, is acting like a free man, acting like a rich person, leaning back in our chairs, leaning to eat out, and make, sitting with a pillow, being comfortable and really enjoying the Seder like the free men that we are, thanks to the Exodus. Okay. We don't really have much time for much else. I'll finish with just one reminder. On Thursday, I have to get the date. On Thursday, the 21st, then it is the day before 2 days of Yom Tov. The first day of Yom Tov will be Friday, and the second day of Yom Tov will be on Shabbos. So for that reason, we have to remember to do Erev Tavshilin. Erev Tavshilin simply involves taking a cooked and a baked food, for example, a boiled egg and a matzah, and putting them aside and not using from them. It's complicated, the reasoning behind it, but in short, we should remember, and this allows us to be able to cook on Friday for Shabbos. Generally, we're not allowed to prepare from one day to the next, one day of Yom Tov to the next, one day from Yom Tov to Shabbos, generally we're not allowed to prepare, but in this case, we are allowed to prepare. We shouldn't eat the food that we put aside for Erev Tavshilin until it actually is Shabbos already. Many people have the custom during the 3rd meal on Shabbos. That's when they eat the matzah and the egg. Make sure it doesn't get consumed. If you did forget to do Erev Tavshilin, you can rely on the Erev Tavshilin that every rabbi does for their community in case they forget, which is b'diavad. There's some say that you can only rely on it once because you shouldn't be forgetting. It's a very simple thing to do. And again, this is a mitzvah to do. There's a blessing to make on performing this obligation of Erev Tavshilin, which is putting aside a baked and a cooked food, and that's all it is. But it allows us to then prepare for to then prepare on Friday the food for, and even heat up and the food that we need for Shabbos. Okay, last thing, Second last thing is, what do you do if you find chametz on Pesach? You know, you get delivery or whatever it may be. So generally, if it's on Yom Tov itself, chametz has the status of muktzah, which means we're not allowed to touch it. Why? Because it has no use. Because we can't eat it, we can't benefit from it. Chametz has no use. Therefore, if we find it, we just have to cover it or kick it under somewhere. And again, have in mind that you don't want it. You're not interested in it. And either way, by this point, we'll have said 3 times that we're not interested in any chametz that we don't know about. We don't want ownership of it, but we kick it away in order that we don't eat it. If we find it after Yom Tov, then we're allowed to pick it up, and we should pick it up and throw it out, preferably flush it down the toilet in a way that we don't have any benefit from it. But don't carry it with your hands, because then you'll have crumbs of chametz on your hand. And again, even a crumb of chametz on Passover is a problem. So flush it down the toilet, but do the same thing. But now you can move it with your hands, but move it with a glove, again, because it's not Yom Tov, it's only muktzah on Yom Tov and Shabbos. If a chametz item was by mistake purchased on Passover, then it should be burned again, or flushed down the toilet is another form of getting rid of it. And the same applies for a package that was delivered on Passover. Because you're not allowed to leave chametz on your property over Passover, again, chametz that you own. If you sold the chametz, then it's fine, but chametz that you own, you're not allowed to leave on your property, then you have to, if the delivery took place on Yom Tov, cover it. If the delivery took place on Chol HaMoed, get rid of it. And I'll finish with this. You know, there's something beautiful about Passover where every family has their own customs. Every family has their own, rituals that they do. And it's one of the most beautiful things about Pesach. And, our sages tell us that some of the customs we don't really understand so much anymore. For example, kitnia. What's wrong with corn? Nowadays, corn is kept far away from wheat. It's mass produced in big warehouses. But because we had a custom then not to eat corn, the vast majority of Ashkenazim don't eat kitniot anymore. Why? Because there's something about Passover which, to put it in 3 words, it celebrates the generations. It celebrates our continuity, and it celebrates our family time. The fact that we have these beautiful customs which go from generation to generation, and it's a time when we focus on these customs, even on those which may not apply as much anymore. But it's important that this Chag, this Yom Tov, more than any other, we give particular importance to all the customs that we have, and from generation to generation, pass these on to our children. And it's the most beautiful thing about Pesach, and that's how we do. We sit around in family time during the Seder, in family time during Yom Tov, and hopefully we will see the final Yeshua, the final Exodus for all of us as we all go to Israel in the coming of Mashiach very speedily in our days.
Amen.
Thank you very much, everybody. Again, you can find a copy of the times on the website. I'm actually going to put it in the chat right now. So you can all print out the times for Passover. We will be having a minyan on Chol HaMoed this year. There's no school. Shachris every day will be at 8 a.m. and there's Torah reading every single day. So I do look forward to that. Let me just, here we go, Pesach times.
And Rav, for Sunday, what time is the catering event?
10 a.m. 10 a.m.
Lovely.
in
Thank
the
you.
dairy kitchen. 10
Excellent.
a.m.
Thank you.
in the dairy kitchen. Yes. Sure.
How do you capture? We have a new grill, a gas grill in the back. Can you capture that?
So yes. So the thing about the grill is there's 2 elements to it. Generally, where the fire touches, when we talk about capturing something where the fire touches, like a cooker or a stovetop, as long as it's 100% clean, you turn it on the highest for a few even seconds, it burns itself out because nothing can be absorbed when you have the heat of the fire there itself. The issue with the grill is the roof above the grill.
Yeah.
So generally, I mean, we can discuss the specifics of it, but if you could cover that, then the grill, as long as it's 100% clean, can be cashered quite easily for Pesach. And again, when we talk about clean, very often you find both in ovens and grills, like, black marks on the sides. We have to get rid of those as well because those could be elements of food.
And what if you just keep the grill open the whole time and not have the lid come down on the food at all?
Yeah, that would be it. So if it doesn't go on top, if the grill's totally open, then that would be a way to get around it. Yeah, we can talk about the specifics of cashiering a grill because there's a few elements. There's a tray, there's a fire, and then there's the lid as well. And obviously it should all be clean, but yeah, we'll talk about the specifics of what to do about it. Anyway, thank you all so much for coming.
Yeah.
Wishing you a very happy Freedom Festival, very happy Pesach, and we look forward to many happy times together. Thank you.
Yes.
Amen. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.